In your target stand kit, you'll find everything you need pre-cut to dimensions. You want to do a layout, just make sure you have all the components called out in the instructions. First thing, you can sequence this however you wish, but for this video, we'll start out with the nuts that have to get tacked on to the pieces that are going to hold the 2x4 in place in case you're going to use a target stand for hanging steel. That piece right there would be the one for hanging the steel if you got a center hole drilled in your steel. If you've got two holes in your steel, then you might have to adapt a design to it. So with the nuts, keep in mind that when you tack, it pulls as that weld puddle cools. So if there's a little bit of movement in the hole, between the hole and the bolt, you're going to want to put that gap, push the bolt to one side when you got that in there. Tack on the side that had the gap so that when it does cool, it kind of pulls it closer to center. You only need 2 tacks on this. There's not a lot of torque being held on the 2x4 to keep that in place. Good idea to let the components cool down before you take the bolt out. It might be a little bit easier. Towards the end of the video, we'll cover using a tap and chasing the threads if needed. Once you have these tacks in place, you're going to move on to the hanger. You can remove the spring and hardware. This one's going to be a corner to corner joint. You'll see when you fit it up, for me, I use this little handy strong hand tool here to just give me a third hand. I'm going to tack the corners, constantly kind of checking your components are staying where you want. Because like I said, once you tack, things start shifting around. So just keep an eye on that. Now you got 3 tacks on the component. That kind of locks most components in. I'm going to run from a corner into the other tacks and then connect these tacks. You can run it the other way, but just keep in mind if you run out towards an edge, as that material gets hot, you have to be careful at the end of your weld so you don't blow through. All right. Clean and inspect your welds. Make sure you don't have any repairs to do there. As you're moving along here, you'll see how the hanger mounts to the top of the 2x4. Moving on from there, you're going to get that base piece that holds the 2x4. So that component is going to be centered on the crossover of kind of the H frame. So you're going to do all your layout, get that centered in there, mark everything all up, and then you'll end up clamping that, putting your tacks, and as you'll see, kind of the same thing. You'll just start connecting all those tacks and getting into your production welding here. Not going to be too much movement. with this one since you got the clamp. And again, once you got your tacks where you need them, kind of confirm everything's all lined up, and then you go ahead into your production welding. Using GMA process in this video, you can use GTAW, SMAW, FCAW, whichever welding machine you plan on using. It can be handled with any of those processes. You'll see in the instructions, each sheet comes with some recommendations, filling material selection, type and size, depending on the process that you have. Again, kind of cleaning and inspecting as you go. Now moving on to the base, getting that crossover centered. You can either mark center or knowing the dimensions, you can mark center and then, subtract either half of that or add half of that. Put the mark there so you can line the edge up. Sometimes it's easier to see the edge of your pieces instead of trying to line up centers. Right here, just projecting your marks. Once you get it kind of dialed in where you want, you're going to end up clamping down to the table. Confirm square again before you lay your tacks in. So same as before, you're going to get all your tacks, confirm that everything's true, all your dimensions are being met. Then you can production weld it out, still validate it, but that one last check at tacks, you have your last moment there before you production weld it. You can cut those tacks while you still can and make any small adjustments. But once you're ready, then go for it. Get this thing all welded out. Because these projects are kind of small, typically you can move them however you want. You don't have to weld in out of position type welding, so you might as well make it a little bit easier on yourself, unless you're going to challenge yourself and keep it locked in one spot and then manage all your horizontal, vertical, overhead. As much as you want to challenge yourself, you can even grab a mirror, weld some of it in the mirror if you want. All right, so as this one gets welded out, the top portions of here are going to get welded, and then you'll notice on the instructions it calls for a contour grind on this, or contour it's called out. So you're going to flush out the top of these welds, and that's going to allow you to fit up the next components that are going to hold your uprights, like typical one buys, furring strips, lumber for putting your cardboard and paper type targets. You got the dimensions on the instruction sheet, and then just going to kind of keep validating that everything's all true and square. Helpful to have either somebody there to help hold it in place, or some type of tool like this strong hand one to just keep it in place while you tack it. And then you're going to notice that when you tack this one here, it's going to want to pull, so you might have to make an adjustment with a hammer to knock it back down, get it back into being true and square. There's a little bit of movement there, so sometimes what you'll see is, if you notice in the video, I'll have to press down on that component right before I tack. And I already knew from looking at the square that took out the gap in that, and it brought everything square. And then just do your tack with one hand and pressing down with the other. Again, once you confirm everything, go ahead and production weld it out. While you're doing this, not only cleaning it, but when I mentioned inspecting it as you go, you'll be validating that you're meeting your called out weld sizes. All right, so now it's starting to kind of come together here. Imagine where that 2x4 is going to rest in the middle if you're hanging steel, or you got your uprights for your cardboard and paper targets on the sides there. And then here's chasing the threads that I mentioned earlier, just to make it so that when you get out to the range or out into the field, wherever you're going to use this, that you don't have any problems, running these thumb screws by hand. Have nice clean threads. You'll appreciate it later. If there's any distortion from welding, this kind of help true up your threads also. I don't want to sound like the people that about moving into final assembly.
No way, man.
Right? About ready to paint. Awesome. And here you go. Here's your product ready to take out to the range or out into the field and have some good range time. Hope you enjoyed this project.